Joining us now, Corey Lewandowski. Corey Lewandowski, the former campaign manager of Trump 2016, also New York Times best-selling author. 2 books, not one. Some people, maybe once in their life they get a New York Times bestseller. Now Corey's got 2. Let Trump Be Trump and Trump's Enemies, and he's now senior advisor with Trump Pens 2020, and he's with us now live in New Hampshire. Corey, great to have you.
Good morning, John. How are you?
Good. In my Open America tour, I want to get your take. Now, the president now encouraging governors to start opening up America for business. We got 35 million people unemployed, but the Democrats still want to shelter in place and have everything shut down. What gives?
Look, John, I had the privilege to speak with the president at length this week, and he completely understands the need for people to go back to work. And obviously, his first priority is always going to be the safety and security of the American people. That's the most important thing. But secondarily to that, and it's very close, is making sure that people have the opportunity to provide for their families, pay their mortgages, buy food, pay their car payments. And the only way to do that is to be able to get the economy open again, to get people back to work. And what we're seeing across this country is states are starting to slowly open. Is there some concern in some sectors, of course, about a resurgence or additional COVID-19 deaths? You bet there is, and that's a real concern. But you have to also understand, and what the president has said on so many occasions, is the solution can't be worse than the problem. So we have to start to open the economy back up. We have to give people the opportunity to have some personal responsibility here. And if you're in a high-risk environment or a high-risk category, don't go out and don't put yourself in those positions. But if you're a 30-year-old healthy individual, you should have the opportunity to go and provide for your family, or a 40-year-old, or whatever it may be. But the point is, the government has to start to allow people to do this with the necessary precautions in place.
I mean, when you say the necessary precautions in place, like, define that, because one of the concerns I have, Corey, is a lot of these metrics are undefined, and the one that the president laid out, the phase 1 opening, which is cases have to go down for 14 days. Well, testing is going up dramatically. I don't even think we should be, but it is. But they're mutually exclusive. So like in Virginia, when I complained to the governor here about extending the shutdown, he says, well, you're president. I'm just following your president's guidelines. I mean, so how do you reconcile that, Corey?
Well, look, John, I think what you have is it's very unique. The president has asked the governors to follow through on what they believe is best for their state. But when I say personal responsibility, John, look, we can't continue to do things the way it's always been done, and there are going to be changes. That means people have to do a better job in personal hygiene, washing their hands and taking care of themselves. The airlines have put in these parameters that if you want to fly on a commercial airline, which is a choice and not a luxury that they have to offer, you have to wear a mask. So, look, there are things that are going to happen. Do I think it's insane that if you're in the state of Massachusetts, anywhere in public, and you don't have a mask on, it's a $300 fine? You bet I do. Do I think it's insane that the woman who opened up her beauty salon against the advice of the government is going to go to jail for 7 days? You bet I do. And I believe that the federal government is going to have to come in and crack down on these governors who are abusing this pandemic. And we've seen this now, particularly in the religious environment, where there was a pastor who was charged with having a drive-by church. I mean, so we have to, when I say personal responsibility in a safe manner, it means being smart about what you're doing, right? If you feel comfortable about going to a movie theater, then you should have the right to do that on the condition that that personal responsibility is in place. And if you don't want to go, John, you don't have to go. But we can't continue to allow the government to pick the winners and losers, and it's different by every state. You want to go to the state of Georgia and you want to have a landscape company, that's considered okay, but you go next door, it's not okay. I mean, this is the problem, and we've seen too many entities like Walmart, which is considered a important company. I get it, absolutely get it, right? They're providing a service to the people, food, etc. But what about all the mom and pop shops? And they're determined that they're not essential? How is that fair? How should the government be allowed to do this?
And they're selling the same items. So
That's
basically,
right.
A lot of these swing state blue governors like Tom Wolf in Pennsylvania, Evers in Wisconsin, Whitmer in Michigan, Northam in Virginia, I have the opinion that They know the small business people vote for Trump. They never vote for them. So it's like, well, let's just get rid of them. Because I can buy the same thing in Walmart or Lowe's that I can buy at the local guy on Main Street. One is open, the other's forced to shut down and go bankrupt. How's that make sense, Corey?
It doesn't make any sense at all, and it's not fair. Because, and look, the other thing we have seen, John, unfortunately, is we've seen gross abuse through the system of companies who are receiving money. Harvard University, the Los Angeles Lakers, right? These are literally multi-billion-dollar companies. The Los Angeles Lakers is valued at like $4.4 billion. They get a $6 million bailout. We've seen publicly traded companies getting bailouts. We've seen Harvard University get $8 million out of this fund. That's a gross abuse of the system. The money should be going to where it's needed, which is those small business owners, those mom-and-pop shops who might have one to call it 50 or 60 employees, designed to keep them afloat during this troubled time. Restaurant owners, hairdressers, whatever it may be, anybody who's operating basically inside a strip mall is trying to stay alive. And, it's almost impossible right now because these governors across the country, by and large, have said everybody has to close unless you're a Walmart or you're some superstore.
It's unbelievable. Corey, when you talked to the president yesterday at length, we're with Corey Lewandowski. I mean, I know you told him this. And from his standpoint, he's not going out and shopping like we are. Does he see what's happening?
He absolutely does, John. And look, the president understands it implicitly because in his heart of hearts and his background is as a small business owner. Now, he built a company into a large conglomerate and has obviously made billions of dollars from it, but it's the same basic premise is the people who work for him in his old company are being impacted just like everybody else. Now, he's not involved in the day-to-day decision rights, and Eric and Don Jr. are running the company now, but they have had to lay off hundreds of people through their different companies. And so he sees it. And the thing about Donald Trump that I had the opportunity to witness before he became the president is how he knows every person at all of these companies, whether he's at a golf course or he's at one of his facilities. He knows who these people are. They all know him. And so these are all personal stories that he completely understands. There's no question about it. This is not someone who has been sequestered in the White House, not fully realizing the impact.
When you talk to him, what is his sense of urgency in opening the country back up for business and getting people back to work and, having things like football in the fall and having colleges open and having schools open? What is the president's sense of urgency for that, Corey?
Well, let me say, we didn't talk about a specific sporting event or a specific institution of opening. We talked in the larger scale, and what we talked about was the need to do this and to do it very quickly in a smart way. Look, I can tell you, John, my boys are dying to play football. You know that. I've got an 11-year-old and a 9-year-old, and they are ready to play. We've got notice from the local community here that they're going to have a football season this year, which is a sign in the right direction. We know that NASCAR is having a race in 2 weeks on a Sunday. I think it's the 17th. It's the first of what will probably be major sporting events that are starting to come back, and I'm not sure if there are going to be fans or not in the stands, but people are going to be watching NASCAR on TV because they haven't seen a sporting event in a long time. But the president gets it. He absolutely gets it, and he knows that people's way of life has completely been altered by this pandemic. Nobody could have known this other than the Chinese, who clearly haven't been very honest with us. The World Health Organization wasn't honest with the world when they found out about this. And we're all seeing the consequences of that. So he understands that we have to open this economy. There's obviously some concern by some of the medical professionals who are surrounding him that if you open it too quickly, you could have a spike in additional cases. But I go back to what he said, John, and he said it so many times, the solution cannot be worse than the problem. And right now, the solution of 30-plus million Americans, 19-plus % unemployment rate, when we had the hottest economy in the world and we have to grow it back, is one that he understands fundamentally. We can't just leave our country closed for the fear of potentially contracting a disease, which it looks like now many, many, many people have gotten and many people have recovered from.
Millions, up to 50 to 60 million Americans now, based on some studies, have had this and recovered. We're with Corey Lewandowski. He's senior advisor, Trump Pence 2020, author of 2 books, Let Trump Beat Trump and Trump's Enemies. You can get them on Amazon. You can get anything on Amazon, right? They're one of the winners in this whole thing. Whole nother story. Corey Lewandowski with us here on the John Fredericks Radio Network. We're live in the Delta in Clarksdale, Mississippi. We'll be in Tennessee Thursday and Friday in our Open America tour. Corey, one of the problems here that a lot of my listeners are very frustrated about is the president will say one thing, and then Dr. Fauci and Dr. Birx, I'm for firing Fauci. That's just me, but they'll go on TV, they'll run the CNN or Stephanopoulos, and they'll basically overturn and dispute exactly what the president says. So we're getting mixed messages coming out of the same room, and that's frustrating a lot of Trump's base. What is your response to that?
Well, look, John, I think we heard from the vice president yesterday and the team that they're thinking about winding down the coronavirus task force. That they are going to continue to take input and consultation from the medical professionals, but the need to be out every single day having these press conferences is starting to come to a close. And I think that's important because what we have seen is there is one president and one vice president. They speak on behalf of our government. And what we have seen all too often is individuals who have gotten what we like to say Trumpified, right? All of a sudden they become stars because they've been associated with Trump. And this happens, around the Trump world all the time. Somebody is involved in a particular subject matter, and they end up getting very, very well known and have a lot of notoriety, and then all of a sudden they feel compelled to go out and start saying something contrary to what the president is saying. There has to be a unified message. I am tired of unelected bureaucrats, unelected government officials, people who are supposed to be serving the president only out serving themselves. So I know there was pushback yesterday as they said that we will probably be winding down the coronavirus task force by Memorial Day. I think it's the right thing, and I think that allows the continuity of messaging coming from the White House to come from one location and not from these unelected bureaucrats.
Yes, best decision they made, best news I heard. I think the communication coming out of the White House, Corey, in the last month was their best moment, especially the last 2 weeks. The mixed messages, I think we should fire Fauci, but certainly get him off the TV. And the fact that these people can just pop off and say whatever they want, I mean, it's incredible to me. I mean, you can't run any communications operation with people saying different things within minutes of each other and have any kind of a unified message that people can find to be coherent. I think that's part of the problem. All right, a couple other issues. New York Times yesterday, John Hopkins, somebody leaks a John Hopkins study, which was, worst case scenario, kind of like war games. This is what we do if the Chinese attack Hawaii type of thing. It leaks out that all these people are going to die again, and the Times runs it on the front page, never apologizes, never any disclaimers, never explain what it is. It gets leaked to scare people. What is the purpose of this?
John, look, your listeners have now heard this for years. The New York Times has their own agenda. And you know what? I think on the heels of the Pulitzer Prize being awarded this year, the New York Times and the Washington Post should be forced to give back the Pulitzers that they won or were awarded for the work that they did on the Michael Flynn story, because we now know the whole thing was a complete hoax. And so this is just part and parcel to how the New York Times operates. Look what they did as it related to the Kavanaugh hearings. They asked for the FBI to investigate. When it came to Joe Biden, they asked the Democratic National Committee to investigate. I mean, the New York Times has lost so much credibility, John, that their favorability ratings, and people believe them, somewhere in the single digits again. Because this is what they do. They are salacious. They are getting to the point of tabloid-esque. And look, there are some good reporters over there who do good work, but by and large, what we have seen, because of the way the newspaper is run, and particularly by Dean Baguette, who can justify anything with his words, saying that Joe Biden was not a public figure, and that's why they waited 19 days before they engaged in the Tara Reade story, was they just say whatever they want that's convenient to move their left-wing agenda. And what we're now seeing, John, is this is just another attempt to embarrass the administration, another attempt to play gotcha, as opposed to giving the American people real, honest news and being candid with them. They don't have any interest in doing that. They have an interest in making the news, not reporting the news.
Corey, let's get to the Tara Reid issue. Biden made his denial, no follow-up, right? He had 2 interviews, and that was it. Nobody asked about it. Pelosi on one of the MSNBC shows asked about it last night and said she didn't want to talk about it. It's already been resolved. Kavanaugh, that thing went on for what, 9 days, right? I mean, there's more evidence against Biden than they ever had against Kavanaugh. The hypocrisy here is just beyond the... How did they get away with this?
John, because it's an unchecked system. And look, you know what, the New York Times isn't accountable to the American people. They're not accountable for the mistakes that they make. And, you know, I understand putting the press secretary of the White House on the spot and asking tough questions, but a question of, do you promise never to lie to us? That's a gotcha question. Right, it's one of the first questions that Kayleigh McEnany was asked during her first press conference, and she said, yes, I promise never to lie to you. My response, John, and this is why they'll never have me as the White House press secretary, was, hey, do you promise to always get the facts right in all of your stories? Do you promise to stop making up
That's exactly
stuff?
what
Right?
I would have said the same thing.
I mean, look, if you promise that you will never make a mistake in any of your stories, whether it's in print or on television, then yes, I promise never to lie to you. Well, we don't do it purposefully. Well, I can literally give you dozens upon dozens upon dozens of stories, and the Media Research Center in Washington, D.C. tracks this all the time, of stories which we know to be factually inaccurate from the beginning that never get the apology. So, you know, again, John, it's the hypocrisy of the media, and I just go back to, and your listeners probably have even forgotten this, from day one, Donald Trump walked into the Oval Office, and Jeremy Diamond of CNN wrote a story that the bust of Martin Luther King was removed, and all but said Donald Trump was a racist for doing that. And if the guy would have taken the 15 seconds and made a phone call it was Zeke Miller of Time. If he would have taken 15 seconds to make a phone call or an email over to the office to ask why it was removed, he would have been shown that it's in the exact same spot that it was under President Obama, but somebody was standing in front of it. And so, you know what, if that's the culture that we're going to have, then stop asking the gotcha questions to Kayleigh McEnany already, because that's not a great way to start a relationship.
How do we beat Joe Biden?
Look, the easiest way. It's called Lincoln Douglas-style debates. It's called put Joe Biden on TV every single day. It's called make sure he does 1,000 radio shows and give him more free airtime than any candidate in the history of the presidency, because there is no American who can listen to Joe Biden and truly believe. And John, I'm not being negative. I'm not being pejorative. I'm not trying to be demeaning. There is no American that can listen to Joe Biden for any length of time and truly believe he has not had an issue somewhere. Maybe it's a stroke. Maybe it's Alzheimer's. I don't know what it is. I'm not a doctor. I'm not a clinician. I'm not trying to diagnose him. But the way he speaks clearly indicates something has happened. And I think the more he's in front of the American people, the stronger the case is for Donald Trump.
You used a baseball analogy a couple weeks ago, and you said he's lost his fastball, and you know that happens to pitchers, as you know, when they get older. You were throwing 92, now you're throwing 86. It's over. I just kind of think that's where he is. He isn't at the top of his game. He's holed up in the basement. He makes no sense. So we'll see what happens. You know, Corey, I know we're down in the polls right now. We went through this in 2016. It's a long way out. A lot can happen. But what the president's got to do, Corey, as you know, is we got to get this economy open. We got to get production back, and we got to get people back to work.
You're 100% right, John. Listen, it's so important that we get our economy up and moving again. People are ready. It has been 8 long weeks for some people more. And look, we see states who are saying, hey, we're going to open in July. What are you talking about, right? It's July insane. 6th, I think. That to me is insanity. And I'm not partisan politics, but it doesn't make any sense, because those people need to go back to work, whether you live in the state of Oregon or you live in the state of Mississippi or you live in my home state of New Hampshire. People want to go back to work. Let's do that. And, John, my argument, and your listeners will know this, my big complaint has been, how many people who are government employees have been laid off because of this?
Zero.
The answer is zero, right? So we've completely decimated small business owners, people who have built their businesses for 40 years, sacrificed blood, sweat, and tears to put in to grow something so that when they retire, they have the financial resources to survive, because there is no pensions anymore in the private sector. I don't know of one government employee who has been laid off or terminated because of the coronavirus. And to me, that's mind-numbing when the state of California is now getting a bailout from federal tax dollars because of the way that they've managed their money.
It's unbelievable. And right now, federal workers in Washington, D.C., streets are empty. They get to work from home until May 29th in their pajamas doing Zoom. I mean, it's just really unbelievable. Corey, I'm out of time, man. Thank you. I really appreciate it. Corey Lewandowski with us, Senior Advisor, Trump Pence 2020.